Okay, well, welcome everyone to the launch of Workers for Energy for All. My name is John. I handle unions and communities at Fuel Poverty Action. Tonight's rally is about highlighting the demand for energy for all within your union, but it's also about how we use radical solidarity to challenge both climate change and the cost of living crisis. We all know that these are, in fact, one crisis, which is a crisis of excessive greed. We'll be hearing from a number of trade unions and different unions talking about the work they're already doing and how we can support them. For those of you who don't know, Energy for All is a revolutionary new principle for energy pricing. It already has the support of over 250 organisations, including trade union bodies, and over 660,000 people have signed up to the petition. So now Ruth, one of the founders of Fuel Poverty Action, will tell you a little bit more about what it is. Ruth. You're muted.
Sorry about that. So this is where we are. In this wealthy country, nearly a third of children are living in poverty, and most of them have parents who are in work. Millions of people are living miserable lives in cold, damp homes, and thousands are dying from this every winter. In 21st century Britain, many hungry people can't even afford to boil a kettle. Young people are growing up not knowing if there will be a livable planet to last through their expected lifetimes, and then they wonder why there's mental health problems among young people. And the government just talks about things getting worse. We're told that money is really short, but many of us know that we are being systematically and knowingly impoverished. There is plenty of money, but it has been for decades sucked out of the hands of the mass of the population to flow into the offshore accounts of oligarchs, billionaires, and multinational corporations, especially the fossil fuel industry. Energy for All is a way to reverse that flow of wealth. With Energy for All, everyone will get for free the energy they need to cover essentials like heating, cooking, washing, charging devices, and disability aids. The cost of this essential energy will be covered, A, by wealthy people paying more than they pay now for their luxury use and their waste, and B, by reclaiming money from the fossil fuel industry. E for A, Energy for All, is not charity. Instead, it attacks fuel poverty at its roots. It has four huge advantages. One, security. There will be no means test to qualify for it, and there's no stigma. This is the universal principle that founded the NHS. Enough to cover your basic needs is guaranteed. That security translates into health, physical health, and mental health. Two, justice. Under the present pricing system, those with the least resources pay most. Due to the standing charge, people heating their swimming pools pay less per unit than a pensioner in a bedsit. People charging electric vehicles pay less than people renting flats with electric storage heaters. And of course, people in poor housing pay through the roof. They're heating the streets through the roof. Energy for All will end the bonanza for the wealthy and the bonanza for the fossil fuel giants that have been carving insane profits from our bills. And it will help to take energy into public hands. The third advantage of Energy for All is that it will contribute to cutting carbon emissions. Climate change is not a theory. It has already caused millions of deaths. Deaths from heat, including overheated workplaces, deaths from extreme cold, floods, and hurricanes. We are already experiencing terrible droughts that starve some people and push up prices, food prices, for all of us. Huge parts of the earth are becoming uninhabitable. You cannot bargain or negotiate or make deals with climate change. You can't make it wait until everything's in place. Defending the earth we live on and defending our next meal have to be simultaneous, in lockstep, as they are with Energy for All. Because unfortunately, there can be no plan without the planet. Fourthly, Energy for All makes warm homes a state responsibility. So it incentivizes the government to cut costs by ensuring that our homes are well insulated. That doesn't just mean pouring more public money into private developers and refurb schemes that can sometimes make things worse rather than better. With the last government, we had it up to here with cowboy corporations, the ones responsible for Grenfell. We've had it with unaccountable, lying, cost-cutting, exploitative billionaire developers and retrofit scammers. We need an accountable construction industry with a well-trained, well-paid, very much expanded workforce. Unions have been pressing for this for generations. Construction workers and the residents they build for have common interests in safe materials and well-built homes. And pricing policy is just as much trade union business as wages policy is. We are not just asking for a sticking plaster to limp on another day. The state we're in is far too serious for that. The money is there. God knows we need it now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. And I know our next speaker probably embodies the spirit of solidarity himself. He's always prominent in a number of social causes, demonstrations. He is the president of the Bakers, Food and Allied Workers Union, which was one of the first trade unions, along with the PCS, to sign our manifesto. I'd like to introduce Ian Hodson.
Thank you very much, and obviously it's a pleasure to have been invited along to this launch tonight. It's a really important cause. I mean, it's about breaking down that understanding that seems to have been built up by the politicians and the media class that, you know, the issue of climate and the issue of energy is not for us. It's, you know, something that we just have to endure. We can't do anything about it. And really, it's just a middle class issue anyway. It's not really impacting the working class. It's not anything that we really need to concern ourselves with. But when you actually look at the reality of the climate crisis and the costs of energy in recent years, what you see is the impact is directly impacting working class people and working class communities here in the UK and right around the globe. The ILO recently reported that around 2.4 billion workers globally are likely to be exposed to health hazards like cancer, cardiovascular illness, kidney dysfunction, and physical injury as a result of climate change. The report called for ensuring safety and health in a changing climate. It says excessive heat affects 70% of the global workforce of 3.4 billion, causing 18,970 work-related deaths and around 23 million workplace injuries annually. Those are direct impacts on working class people in working class communities here and around the globe. Yet when you pick up a press or you listen to the politicians, they want us to believe that it's not our issue and it's not our problem. We've seen that one of the first things that the government has done is to take away the financial support to pensioners. But yet at the same time, it invested the same amount of money in a war in Ukraine. It's about political choices, and it's part of the reasons why government and media work hand in glove to distract people from the reality of the situation we face. One of the campaigns we recently got involved in is one called Heat Strike, and we're going to be taking a motion to conference around the aims of Heat Strike, which include a maximum working place temperature of 27 if you're working in a manual job, and 30 degrees if you're working in an office environment, where legislation should force your employer to take necessary measures to protect you in those types of conditions. But we also recognise that when we had the extreme heat a couple of years ago, I know this summer's been a bit of a washout, especially if you're in the northwest, but you know, the reality is when we do get extreme heat, and anybody who saw the interview I did on Storm Huntley the other week sees that people's understanding of working in extreme heat, they try and compare the UK with working in Africa. The thing is, in Africa, they do have legislation that protects workers when it actually gets to a particular heat. Even in the United Arab Emirates, they have protections in place to protect workers, but in the UK, we have nothing. So what we're saying is that it's about time we actually planned for the catastrophe that happens when the extreme heat happens in the UK. 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, when we had that extreme heat in the UK, nothing worked. We had to shut factories, the railways got shut down, buses couldn't run, cars were actually setting on fire on the motorway. And what we're saying is we need to be prepared for that, because in many cases, workers were expected to use their holidays or take time off unpaid. Now, workers aren't responsible for the climate crisis. They haven't issued any of the licenses to the gas or oil companies. They've not made any of the profits that these gas and oil companies have benefited from decisions by politicians, normally bought by the business lobby. So what we're saying at such times is that a worker shouldn't pay, they shouldn't have to use their holidays, and they should be compensated through the use of a furlough scheme. Now, we're not bothered who pays it, whether it's business or whether it's government, but somebody should make sure that workers are compensated and don't have to use their holidays at a time when it's not their fault that they're unable to go to work. We're hoping the TUC will back the call. I mean, we're hopeful of their support on the basis that they actually turned Workers' Memorial this year into supporting the aims and objectives of doing something about climate change and recognising the need to do something. But I do think it's important that trade unions recognise there isn't a role for trade unions to think it's about protecting employment. It's about protecting life. And the need for us to do that collectively is now. There are things that we can do as trade unionists. If we want to live in a world where we can see generations go from strength to strength, then the labour movement and the trade union movement itself has to recognise we have to put the issues around protecting employment second to protecting the world, because there are no jobs on a dead planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Ian. Yeah, and as we said before, Energy for All has the support of 250 organisations. So if you do represent an organisation that would like to sign the manifesto, please follow the link in the chat. We also have a number of union branches signing up to affiliate to FBA. So if your branch can affiliate, check the chat for the link for our model affiliation motion. As we have said, this is not just pie in the sky thinking. This is a practical demand. For instance, the New Economics Foundation published a detailed report on potential modelling for this. And the principle of an energy allowance is also supported by the TUC. Our next speaker is Sam Perry, the Green Bargaining Officer for the North East Yorkshire and Humberside TUC, who's going to talk a little bit more about it. Sam.
Thanks a lot, John. And just to echo immediately what Ian and Ruth said, everything they said is entirely valid. And we are fully supporting in the TUC the Energy for All campaign. It's the right campaign, it's got the right asks, and it's coming at the right time. This is an urgent matter for working people who we represent. And right now, we've written and released our own report. It's called A Fairer Energy System for Families and the Climate. It's a snappy title, and it talks to very similar issues as this. You can find that online if you do have a look. And I guess that says, and I'm saying now that the facts are very clear. The UK energy system is clearly broken. It's not broken because it's worn out or failed in some unforeseen way. It's broken because it's been broken by the choice to subject it to the market, right? The problem is that the energy has been made into a commodity, something to be sold, and something which, if people don't have the money, could be withheld. So obviously commodifying something so basic is dangerous, as the previous speakers have already set out. It means the ability to live healthily in a home where it's warm enough or occasionally cool enough to safeguard against ill health is dependent on something as insecure and as class dependent as income. And the way that energy has been commodified as well, with substantial standing charges, which households obviously can't escape, also means that it's not just a matter for of doing less or heating fewer rooms, as some people like to pretend. This sort of commodification also means it's locking in poverty for many households. It means that paying energy supply rents, which is what this is, it's a rent payment, has to be given prominence in many cases over buying essentials such as food. The privatization of energy has also driven down standards in the energy companies themselves. Workers are working harder, increasingly taking on the jobs of colleagues who have been cut, and they're making less in real terms year on year. This has been happening for at least a decade. And because companies profit from high energy consumption, they're significantly disincentivized from helping households reduce their consumption and the bills by making homes more energy efficient, right? And this means that more greenhouse gases are obviously emitted than need to be, and it stokes the fires of this horrendous climate change that we're obviously already witnessing in this country and around the world. We're really at the very first steps of that horrible, horrible race. And what we've said in the past, and what I think Energy for All is basically counselling, is that this doesn't have to be this way. And the TC were very clear: we want, or for society, we need energy to be treated as a public good. We need fairer bills, of course. We need all households to receive that initial free allowance. We also need mandatory national social tariff across the board, so that the bills of households with the least are capped at no more than 5% of total income, is what we're arguing. We're also calling for a rapid rollout of funded home energy efficiency upgrades. And as has kind of been touched on before, this needs to be done on a strictly worst first basis. We need to abandon this idea of having different schemes for different types of people, or different locations, or different tenures, or different landlords. Instead, the government must be rolling out upgrades by a strict prioritization based on relative fuel poverty or some other metric that gets to the heart of the issue. And finally, we're clear that the biggest energy retailers must be brought into public ownership. It's plain now that this is the only way that these employers can be made to provide safe and fair work for their workers, but also be held democratically responsible, because they're not at the moment in any shape or form, and be made to work not for shareholders, but for as vital service providers for the public good. Working people obviously need significant reform into that in this sector, and hopefully I've outlined exactly how we think that should go. And so we're fully behind Energy for All. We think it's a key way of achieving that, and I'm very glad to be here supporting this launch. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Sam. Yeah, so a huge part of tonight is also looking at the ways trade unions tackle poverty. The trade union movement is not just about higher wages for workers, but how we improve things for everyone. Our current crisis means that across the UK, thousands of people are having to choose between eating or eating. 2 million low-income pensioners are at risk this winter because Rachel Reeves has taken away their heating lifeline and the winter fuel payment. But children are also in the firing line. Our next speaker is from the National Education Union, and we'll be talking a bit about another universal guarantee, which is one of free school meals. I'd like to introduce Marie Burton, coordinator of the NEU's No Child Left Behind campaign.
Thank you very much, John, and it's a real pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you very much for inviting me. As has already been said, it's clear that the climate crisis and the cost of living crisis are very much intertwined. We are currently the 5th richest country in the world, and yet we are living in a society where 9 children in every class of 30 are growing up poor. And again, as I think Ruth mentioned right at the start of this meeting, a lot of these children have got families who have got at least one parent or carer in work. So something here in the system is very, very much broken. The NEU is currently running a campaign called Free School Meals for All, and it very much says, does what it says on the tin. We are campaigning to make sure that free school meals become something that is universal, so no child goes hungry in school. Everything I'm going to say to you in my 3 minutes is going to be stuff that is very, very obvious. So, for example, children cannot learn when they're hungry. If children are sitting in a classroom and they've got a hungry belly, if they're worried about where they're getting their next meal from, if they're not eating lunch, they cannot concentrate. They cannot do as well as they should be doing in school. There are a significant disadvantage to those children who aren't growing up in poverty. And alongside this, there's a huge number of children who are missing out across the country on the right of free school meals. and they're not actually living in poverty. They're in that kind of line just where they're falling through the gaps. So this is something that we as a nation need to urgently address. There's a huge number of reasons why free school meals for all is a real no-brainer. One of the big ones is health. Just to give you a very quick statistics, I know I've not got long with you tonight. The biggest reason for hospitalisation of 5-year-olds in this country is because of severe tooth decay and therefore tooth extraction. That is a direct result of children as young as 5 having such poor and unnutritious diets that they're actually having to go to hospital to get their teeth removed. This is a really tragic situation, again, in the 5th richest country in the world. Children growing up using food banks, statistically, we know, do worse than their peers who don't use those services in exams. This is something that is really holding a huge number of children back. And aside from all this, stigma is a huge problem. People do not want to be going to school, growing up, feeling like they've got poor written on the back of them. There should be no shame in your background. There should be no shame in where your family come from. And unfortunately, the cards are stacked very much against a huge number of children in this country. So what can we do? We are, as I say, campaigning for free school meals for all to become a right for every child in primary schools across the UK, and we want to try and extend this right wider even than that. And universal free school meals for all provides a huge amount of opportunity, not just to tackle poverty, but also to make some real gains in creating a more green economy and building something more local to economies as well. In London, they've had a rollout of free school meals for every single child in primary school, thanks to Mayor Sadiq Khan's latest innovation. This is something that he's promised to make permanent for as long as he stays mayor in the city. Having spoken to a huge number of different schools and different caterers around London, it's clear that there is a real opportunity here for building green economy here. There's a number of schools that are using real innovative ideas, I guess because of the situation they found themselves in, they've had to really think on their feet, and they are able to be in a position where they're able to create school systems and food systems which are much more localized, much more utilizing local jobs, much more utilizing and then expanding on the local economy. And there's a huge movement now for growing in schools too. So if we were to provide universal free school meals, that would allow us to really push back against some of these companies that have exploited the system in schools at the moment, where catering companies can come into a school, can offer them a relatively cheap contract to provide free school meals, and then once they've signed up to that, rank up those costs every year, and those schools then can't get out of it. In London, we're seeing certain schools being able to get out of those contracts because of this wider provision of universalism. So here again is a really good opportunity for us to make sure that actually schools can, first of all, save on much needed funding. We all know about the crisis of funding in schools, but also make sure that they get those contracts back out of maybe national or even larger corporations and into a more localized, greener economy, which I think is vitally important in terms of where we're heading as a planet, where we need to be really heading with our economy in terms of changing society and make it far more green. And again, there's a huge educational benefit for this. It means that children and young people get a real chance to understand where their food comes from, to understand how you can really save on things like fuel, to understand as well how that all system works in terms of both an economy locally, but also how those things work in terms of making yourself feel good and making sure that you are healthier in your own body. One of the key things we're doing as a union this autumn is we are going on tour. We are taking, essentially, I can only describe it as a Scooby-Doo van. If you've ever seen the Mystery Machine, you'll know what I mean. And I'm hoping there's a link in the chat just now. We're going to be traveling with our Scooby-Doo van all around the country, visiting as many schools as possible. We're meeting celebrities, we're meeting MPs, meeting local councillors, educators, primary school teachers, primary school children, and talking about free school meals. This is a real chance for us to really shine a light on the many, many benefits of universal free school meals. And we would love your support in this. So if you click on that link, you can see how you can sign up to the campaign. If the van is coming to your area, we'd love to see you on the day. We'd love to see you get involved in some of the community work we've got there. If not, then anything you can do on social media or helping us with any press work, again, just gets that news out as much as possible. What we need to try and make sure we do is that everybody who is sitting in Parliament right now is making sure that whether they're in Westminster or whether they're in their constituency office, everywhere they're hearing is about free school meals for all, not just the huge benefits that does for the health and well-being of children, but also those ample green opportunities that this operates for us as well. One final thing I'd like to leave you with is the work of the NEU that we're doing around making schools sustainable. There should hopefully be another link in the chat just coming your way now. There is a huge amount of opportunity to retrofit various aspects of schools, even relatively newly built schools that have been poorly planned, poorly built. We've all saw the terrible issues around the rat crisis right at the start of the year. This is just a really good example of how there hasn't been that kind of investment and forward thinking, not only in, again, the well-being of schools and funding of schools, but what that means in terms of our environment. Even relatively newly built classrooms, we know, overheat up to about 40% of the time. This is a very, very easy to fix issue, but there needs to be the political will and there needs to be the funding behind this as well. So do check out that link and you can find out a little bit more about what the NEU is doing around making schools sustainable. Thank you very much for your time.
Brilliant. Thank you, Marie. And just a reminder, we also have had a number of individual branches sign up to the NG4 campaign. But if you'd like to get your union as a whole to support, we have model motions that can be pushed through branch or forwarded to your union's National Executive Committee, as well as a model motion conference. And next month, we'll be doing a workshop, nothing more exciting, on how to get model motions through your union branch into conference. Along with the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union, the PCS was one of the first unions to sign our manifesto as a whole. The PCS has been instrumental in leading the charge in environmental issues throughout the trade union movement. And our next speaker is Marianne Owens from the National Executive Committee of the PCS and part of the Climate Change and Environmental Subcommittee. Marianne.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm really pleased to be here and really pleased that my union is supporting this as well. I mean, firstly, I think a lot of people always wonder who PCS are, and we're the trade union that represents civil servants, public and commercial services union. So that's everything from the DWP to HMRC to people that look after the royal parks to DEFRA to people that work in Ofgem, the Department for Transport. There's anything governmenty that you can think of. We represent them. And I think, we have, as John just said, we have, I think for as long as I've been involved in the union, which is longer than I care to remember, said, one of the big things that we've got to do is make sure that people understand that climate change is a trade union issue. And that's not just about making sure that your workplace is sustainable, but actually, some of the things that Ian touched on when he was talking about, the wider society and the impact that it has on our members. And I think we know, don't we, from everything we ever read, the people that are really impacted by climate change and the consequences of climate change are working class people, whether that be through the cost of living crisis, whether that be through, not being able to afford to heat your home, or whether that be, I live in Pontypridd in the South Wales Valleys, and 5 years ago we were underwater, and there was absolutely no help given to any of the working people in what is one of the poorest places in Europe, actually, economically speaking. So there's clearly a crossover in this, and I think what we have always said, is that in order to address climate change, we need to address the inherent inequality and imbalances in the power and the economic and political system, and that is what trade unions are here to do. It is interlinked in terms of the struggles that we've got. I mean, in terms of things that we've done, we were signed up to the Million Green Jobs campaign. We've looked at areas within our own departments where we can push things. We cover a lot of the aviation industry, air traffic controllers and things like that, and we have actually produced some studies on how we could green that particular industry, which is something that I don't think people necessarily think of as being something that can be greened. But there are things, and it's down to political will, and that what we always come back to is that this is down to political will. We believe in, and we've always been signed up to just transition. With the proud history we've got of campaigning on green issues, and that's a term that was developed by unions to ensure that workers and communities are protected through any process of change when we're addressing the climate crisis. So that we look at things like a Million Green Jobs. We look at using the skilled workforces that we maybe want to take out of carbonised industries and putting them into other skills you know, pushing along some of the things that we're talking about. I mean, you know, we can't get away from the fact, you know, and I always say, you know, I don't see, you know, obviously there is a climate emergency, but actually what we've got is a crisis of greed. And all the way through, it's about political choices that are being made. You know, I mean, we represent people that collect taxes that could finance the transition. You know, we are people that deliver the social protections, such as the living wage benefits, and supporting workers into new jobs. You know, climate policies that people in places like DEFRA are developing, who are our members. You know, there's a whole host of things that PCS members need to be doing. And one of the things that we are currently campaigning for, and we are hoping that we'll be able to push through with the new government, is clearly we need a rapid decarbonisation of our economy at the moment. And that isn't something that's going to happen in bits. You know, we need nationalisation of the energy industries. We need the kind of things that we're talking about in terms of making it more sustainable for people to be able to actually heat their homes and eat and all the rest of it. But actually, to bring all of that together, one of the things that we are now campaigning for is a national climate service, climate and biodiversity service. And what we would hope to achieve with that would be a body, government run, that would oversee and bring together and implement that decarbonisation of the economy. So you could bring together places like the Department for Transport to look at transport policies. You could bring together DEFRA and EFRA and places like that to look at those policies. You know, look at the energy industry. You know, somebody's put in the chat nationalised water. Yeah, I mean the water companies as well. I mean, there has to be some change in order for this, and it's quite a bold, I think, statement to make, that we're campaigning for a national climate and biodiversity service. But I think the only way that we're actually going to get all of the different bits together, and our union believes to get all of those areas together to talk to each other and to actually come up with structured plans to implement how we could decarbonise our economy, is to get something like that actually off the ground. And again, as we say, it's about political choices. You know, our members are having to choose between heating their homes and feeding their families because they've not had a pay rise in goodness knows how long. But also, you know, they're suffering the consequences of the climate crisis. And we could actually be creating jobs. We could be actually creating skilled jobs, and we could actually be doing something that would not just be sustainable in terms of the environment, but sustainable in terms of our economy as well, if we were to actually implement this properly. So that's what we're currently campaigning for. There's a load of information online about it. Really happy for us to be involved, and I don't want to run over my 3 minutes because I want to hear what everybody else wants to say. But yeah, obviously have a look at the website, loads of information on there, and anything anyone can do to support us and put stuff through to your own union branches, we'd be more than welcome to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne. It's always great to hear from PCS and the amazing work that union is doing on climate change. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind people what the trade union movement is about, and that's being one for a better deal for the working class. Our next speaker is a trade union activist in public transport in Manchester and the coordinator of Strike Solidarity for Manchester TUC. He is also the author of Workers Can Win, a guide to organising at work, and one of the coordinators of Troublemakers at Work, who have a major conference coming up on the 5th of October. So I'm really excited to hear from Allenson. Apologise.
It's all right, thanks. It's great to be here at the launch of this important campaign. Rather than repeating the fantastic points that have been made already, I want to talk a bit about some of the barriers to trade unions taking up issues around energy poverty and climate, because we all know if it was easy, we'd have won by now. So the first one I want to talk about is partnership. So this is the idea that workers and our bosses have shared interests, and you know, instead of our organisations acting independently, we end up kind of lobbying for our employers' business plan. And of course, this is disastrous when our employers' business plans are harmful to the environment, to peace, to health, or whatever it might be. Now, when workers feel weak, there's a great pressure towards partnership. So partnership and building power for workers are mutually exclusive. We have to build workers' power and confidence to be able to take on the boss if we're going to have that independence to be able to challenge their business plan. And we know we need a lot more power if we're going to win the kind of radical change we need. The second area I want to talk about is anti-union legislation, because that limits lawful industrial action to trade disputes, which are very narrowly defined with your own employer. So strikes over issues like climate change or energy prices are generally unlawful. So we need to fight against those anti-union laws. We have to have the creativity to get round them, and we need to defy them where we feel able to. But part of the way that those anti-union laws work is they threaten the union's funds, they threaten the unions as institutions. So a lot of the pressure kind of comes through the people at the top of the union who pay a lot of attention to whether the bank account's in a healthy state, rather than workers who tend to be focused on the union as a means to an end. So our view at Troublemakers at Work is that the grassroots of the unions, the rank and file, if you like, is absolutely key to getting any change. And we know that whenever things kick off, workers start networking to achieve their goals. You know, we visit each other's picket lines or go to solidarity rallies. We campaign against rotten deals that are being proposed, all those kind of things. But often we find ourselves starting from scratch every time. And we think we need some permanent organisation of what you might call the militant or radical minority, trying to become the majority, not being content with that. And that's what Troublemakers at Work is trying to facilitate. We've got this conference coming up, as was mentioned, on the 5th, Saturday the 5th of October, trying to create space where workers can learn from each other, build power, oppose partnership, and encourage solidarity. It's not aligned to any particular union or political group, and it's aiming to be really inclusive and participatory. And that will cover everything from basic organising skills to lessons from the strike wave. But I want to end really just talking about one of the workshops that's there that I think is really relevant tonight, which is about politics in the workplace. And that'll be talking about Palestine and BDS and about climate and just transition, because we get the same arguments, don't we, to oppose effective action on both of these, the counterposing of jobs to climate and to energy prices and climate. And we know that climate change itself is driving inflation, and it will continue to do so. So we really have to learn to get on the front foot and taking on those arguments and not accept those ideas that these are not trade union issues.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Ian. Yeah, and just a reminder, if you haven't already, please save the link to our affiliation motion, which is in the chat. We also have a Workers for Energy for All WhatsApp group where you can keep up to date with the various initiatives going on, and things, you know, like Troublemakers at Work and various other projects. Also, keeping in the theme of prolific grassroots organisers, our next speaker is incredibly active. He is a UCU member and senior lecturer at the University of Essex. Some of you may recognise him from an interesting debate at the World Transform Festival last year. And in addition to this, he is involved with Organise Now, as well as Notes from Below, incredibly interesting publication you can read on how to organise. And he wears many other hats, I'm sure. Jamie Woodcock.
Lovely, thank you very much for the very kind introduction, John. It's really great to come and speak to you all today. As John says, I have many hats, but I'm only going to wear 2 of them in these 3 minutes because, you know, otherwise that would be too many hats, right? I want to just start with the hat of Notes from Below, which, as John said, is an online publication that publishes worker writing and workers' experience of their work, how their work is changing, and their struggles against work, against their employers. And in particular, and I think this, you know, ties in with what we're talking about today, we're doing an inquiry, a set of pieces written by workers in infrastructure. So workers who are involved in electricity, gas, water, the kinds of services that this campaign, at least part of those services, to make available to all, but also to think about the work that goes into making those things run. And we don't often think about this infrastructure, you know, when we're talking about what it means to have energy for all, or fuel poverty, or these sorts of issues. We don't often think about the kind of work that's going on in the background to make sure that that gas or that electricity gets to people. And I think it's vitally important that we do shine a light on what's happening there, because it's workers and often union members who are providing those services. And, you know, this might not come as a surprise to any of you, but what we're starting to find out is just how wrecked British infrastructure really is. The huge underinvestment. You know, I'm sure people followed the story of British gas engineers being put through fire and rehire, that these companies are not only ripping off consumers, forcing people into new forms of poverty, but are also pushing workers into conditions that are unsafe and unsustainable for those as workers. And if you'll excuse the pun, part of the reason I think it's important to talk about this is to think about how some of the workers in energy, they are workers who have the power to transform how this industry operates, and are the kinds of allies we need to be building as a movement when we talk about these issues. There is no one working in energy who's not a manager who wants to rip off consumers. These are a kind of natural alliance to be making in these ways. And so I think it's really important that we reach out to workers when we're thinking about this, reach out to people in those industries, try to support workers when they do have that kind of industrial action. I know GMB members are balloting in gas at the moment over health and safety and bullying, to build those kinds of connections to strengthen this campaign. And I'll finish with my other hat on briefly, which is a project called Organise Now, which the Bakers who've spoken already are a supporter of the project, and also ASLEF and NUS, is a project to try and get those of us who are in the labour movement, those of us who have experience organising, have resources, connecting to people who don't have anybody to talk to about what organising looks like, or don't have connections with the labour movement. And I think it's really important that we talk about the strength of our movement, of the union movement, but also recognise that most people aren't and have never been members of unions today. And we should be reaching out to them, supporting them with campaigns like this, but also campaigns to organise their own workplaces, because a better organised working class is able to demand more for all of us, whether that's in our own workplaces, in our communities, talking about questions like nationalisation. The more of us who get organised, the much more likely we're going to be able to win these sorts of things. And I have a quick shout out for a campaign just to finish on, not directly associated with energy, but about how many people get energised in the morning. We have a campaign with Gales workers to organise a coffee chain. This is a great opportunity to get involved in supporting grassroots worker organising, but also for people to take their first step to figure out what this kind of organising looks like, and then they can take it back into their communities, workplaces and elsewhere to get organised. So I'll share the link for that. Really pleased to come and speak here. I hope the campaign goes well, and all power to the people. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that, Jamie. That's great. And yeah, like I say, every worker should be in a union. See from the sign up, we've got a lot of different unions here tonight. But if you haven't joined a union yet, make sure you do. There's one for every sector. You can go on the TUC's union finder. There's also a couple of non-TUC affiliated unions, things like the IWGB and United Voices of the World, represent casual workers. And if you're not employed, you can still join a union. There is Unite Community, the union that represents people out of work and your benefits. Our next speaker wasn't able to make it tonight. He was from the National Shop Stewards Network, but unfortunately had a family issue. But I'll just briefly mention the National Shop Stewards Network, which is there to rebuild the strength of our working class movement from the bottom up by creating local, regional and national networks. And it's there to put elected reps and shop stewards from different unions in permanent contact with each other. And they do have a lobby day coming up, so that link will be shared there. Moving on though, some unions have actually been easier to bring round for the need of radical action on climate change than others. GMB for a Green New Deal was launched 4 years ago as a group of grassroots members organising for a Green New Deal. Next speaker has been involved with this, but is also an independent lobbyist for a Green New Deal, and will tell you a little bit more about the need for a Green New Deal. I'd like to introduce Cassie Bells from GMB for a Green New Deal.
Hello there, can you hear me okay? Yeah, great. I'm on a dodgy device, so I wasn't trusting it entirely. So I'm Cassie Bellingham. Nice to see you all. So my profile is a little bit out of date because it says on the, I think on the list that I'm part of GMB for a Green New Deal, which I was for many years, and the Socialist Health Association. I've actually stepped back from both of them this year just because I've been running as an independent, and there's fallen foul of some rules and things. So chosen to step back. but very happy to kind of fly the flag for GMB, for a Green New Deal. Essentially, they've been putting a lot of pressure on GMB, initially around the Green New Deal motions at conference. Anyone who pays attention to these things will know GMB voted against consistently. And I don't know if there's anyone on the call who was in those horrendous compositing meetings that I believe broke Labour Party history, and going on for 2 nights and 7 hours in total, and ended up splitting into 2 or 3 motions because GMB has essentially been state captured by the energy industry in real terms. And I don't use that term lightly. So the grassroots group is basically putting pressure on that by recruiting across lots of different branches, making sure that there are motions going up, seeking to activate people who do work in those energy areas to start looking at it themselves and try and break down that jobs versus environment narrative that is so strong within the unions, but particularly within GMB, and that's coming very strongly from the top down, because their leadership essentially doesn't believe in just transition. He thinks just transition is a middle class fantasy, was the term that was that used it as when we were being a little bit gobby at conference one day. So they're a really good group. They're pretty scrappy. They're starting to get quite established now. So if there's anyone in GMB on the call who knows people, please do go along and join them. They could do with some experienced organisers around. What's lovely about that group is it's quite a young group, which is, you know, lovely to see. But that does mean they're really good at the scrappy actions and maybe need a bit more policy support. So that's one of the things that we were pushing on this year. And the other bit that I'm involved with locally is actually with a local group called the North Oxford Socialist Alliance. And one of the things we're doing is working to recruit people outside of our traditional labour movement to fight for the Green New Deal from a community perspective. And we are using historical events to underpin that. So we have a really good opportunity at the moment with a lot of anniversaries of the miners' strikes coming up. You know, there's some big anniversaries, there's going to be some big events. So we are screening films around that. And talking about the difference, what would have happened if someone was fighting for just transition within those trade unions, within those communities, within local authorities, within government. We're saying these industries are dying, not this entire community is going to be decimated. What can we do? How do we plan for 10, 15, 20 years down the line? So that's one of the things we're really doing, is kind of pushing that idea of just transition from a community industrial focus to historical groups. So we have an event called Banbury Uprising happening on the 14th and in Banbury, and we have historians from universities coming, and we also have green activists, and we're pushing that message out a little bit. Come join the fight. So it's been successful so far, so I recommend it as a template, and it's been nice to speak to you all. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Cassie. And yeah, just also another reminder, if you haven't already, make sure you share the link to our affiliation motion for Fuel Poverty Action. There's 2 parts: one to affiliate to FPA, but also to sign the Energy for All manifesto. And yeah, like we say, the need for the Green New Deal is essential because there are no jobs on a dead planet. Certain estimates are that there are 200,000 jobs required in retrofitting, and these are jobs that we will need to fill in the next couple of years. Energy for All will be a massive incentive for this. We have seen that arbitrary targets have led to cowboy retrofit jobs. And if we are to retrofit houses properly, we need a pricing system that incentivizes houses actually being energy efficient, the way that an energy guarantee does. I don't know if some of you may remember, but in the 90s, we did have arbitrary targets on hospital wards, the hospital wards and hospital beds. And what this led to was a system where corridors were renamed hospital wards, wheels were taken off stretchers so they could pull beds, and the position of a hello nurse was created just to say that people have been seen on the target times. And this is the same kind of thing that we're starting to see now with energy retrofitting. So without that pricing system in place, we really won't, we really do need that to get our houses retrofitted. And the climate crisis will define politics and economics throughout this century, impacting working people in every way. from fast rising food prices and shortages, industrial change after floods and fires. The transition is underway, but led by corporate interests at the expense of workers. Now more than ever, we need to build workers' power to both halt industrial pollution and win a transition that is worker-led and fair. Our next speaker is Stu Melvin, who is a trade union coordinator of Climate Justice Coalition. He is also a Unite rep and long-term union and climate justice organizer. Stu.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone. Love to see you all. I won't repeat what other speakers have said, but suffice to say, I agree with what everybody else has said. And to build on that, so yeah, I'm the trade union coordinator at the Climate Justice Coalition. The Climate Justice Coalition was set up as the COP26 coalition. It was the organisation coalition, as it is, that mobilised both domestically and internationally the mass mobilisations around COP26 when it took place in Glasgow a few years back. And the trade union caucus of that coalition, which I coordinate, was set up really to sort of twofold purpose, really. The first, obviously, was to mobilise trade unions as part of that global mobilisation. And we did that under the banner of We Made Tomorrow, which I'll come on and talk a little bit more about in a moment, which was basically to get across the point that it is the working class that creates everything. We create what tomorrow looks like. We create what we make, what we move, what we fix, what we throw away, everything else. Everything in life is created by our labour. And we really wanted to capture that like in a very physical and real sense. We literally could make tomorrow if there was not this, as people have spoken about, lack of political will. I would say vested interest and capitalist power structures standing in our way and preventing that from happening. So we want to kind of reframe that narrative. We mobilised tens of thousands of trade unionists for those mobilisations. We went on over the next years as well, when it was in Sharm el Sheikh as well, to mobilise large-scale convergence there in Sharm el Sheikh, as well as, again, days of action here in the UK and supporting our comrades around the world. I mentioned the other purpose of the trade union caucus that was set up during that process, which was also to reframe some of the debates inside the environmentalist movement and give the trade union movement more of a voice inside that coalition of environmentalists primarily and climate justice activists, and make sure that the trade union voice and workers' voice was clear and was understood there. And in following years since then, obviously the coalition was kind of relaunched as the Climate Justice Coalition in the UK. Still maintains membership of large-scale environmental NGOs, as well as some of our biggest trade unions, as well as lots of other types of organisations. We kind of hit upon this point that in both camps there is a real lack of understanding still across the board. Certainly, the environmentalist movement is I think most people on this call will be trade unionists. I think we're well aware of some of the failures of the environmentalist movement in terms of not understanding class fundamentally and the trade union movement as a whole. But also, likewise, we know that over the last few years, public awareness of climate change has absolutely skyrocketed. We know if you looked at polls going back about 4 or 5 years, you were seeing figures of around 85% of the British public being heavily in support of climate action. However, if you dig into it deeper, the reality is that, of course, the mainstream reporting on it, as well as, again, to be honest, some of the actions of the environmentalist movement over the previous decades had led people to have a really twisted understanding of climate change and thinking of this as primarily, and of course it is this, but as only a problem for nature, for polar bears on ice and all this type of thing. There's a real lack of understanding of it as a class issue, a real lack of understanding of climate change as an economic issue, an industrial issue. So we also then, we carried on the We Make Tomorrow moniker and have organised now 2 large-scale conferences over the last few years, bringing together trade unionists from all different sectors, all different industries, to kind of cross-pollinate and discuss the issue and learn about the issue and dive into it deeper, and also to make links between issues. Again, people here on the call tonight have obviously referenced the polycrisis that we find ourselves in, these multiple intersecting crises that are all to do with how capitalism does or does not function and who it serves. So we've run two of those conferences, bringing together care workers with transport workers, with hospitality workers, with union officials, with all types of folks to dig into it deeper. We're now exploring how to take that further. We know that kind of political education around climate change needs to spread. We need it peer to peer at the rank and file, at the base of our unions. We also desperately need better education and information going to the top of our unions, where our officials are as the worst case, as was mentioned earlier in GMB, but across the board, still very disorientated by this issue, but also by the wider crisis that we find ourselves in. The other thing that we desperately need to do is, as environmentalists and climate activists, to support campaigns like Energy for All that reframe the debate as an economic one, an industrial one, and one of abundance and one of choice, and one of saying, well, what future do we want? Who should energy serve? Who should our infrastructure serve? Who should own it? Who should control it? Ultimately, it should be us. We can make tomorrow, etc. So we need to support campaigns like that. The other campaign that we're supporting at the moment, very much in the same vein, is looking to build a mass movement around raising the minimum wage. Our analysis on this is that fundamentally, we have a situation where, as everybody here will probably recognise, record profits over the last few years. People have got poorer and poorer and poorer, and the minimum wage is far, far, far lower than it needs to be for people to have a decent life. And the reality is that while that's the case, we are going to continue to struggle to engage the majority of working people in this wider issue, because of course we're all just trying to get by and live. And we're also going to make it increasingly easy for the far right to mobilise reaction against climate policies on the fear-mongering basis that they're going to make us poorer, when actually, to some degree, that there are transition policies that are going to make us poorer. Of course, the capitalist policies are going to make us poorer. So fundamentally, we need to get money back in people's pockets as a way of building support for these, and also building hope, optimism, power for how we go on to build. So we're also helping to support the Fight for 15 around that, Fight for £15 an hour, which is at the very minimum what is needed for people to have a decent life, and then engage in these wider issues and rebuild our trade union movement. So I'll pop those links in the chat box if they haven't gone in already. But yeah, big love to everybody here, big support, solidarity. Keep going, keep fighting. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Stu. And yeah, keep an eye out for those links. We did actually have some other ones from the Climate Justice Caucus, so please do post them there. And as always, with the same plug, do keep an eye out for our affiliation motion. Affiliate your branches across the union movement. Our penultimate speaker tonight is also one who wears many hats. Glenn Burrows is not only a member of Bridgewater Trades Council, but also the chair of the Gloucester, Avon and Somerset National Pension Convention, and a member of Unite Community. Unite Community are the section of Unite representing those who are disabled or unemployed or in receipt of state benefits or out of work. So just so you know, there is a union for everyone. Last year, we were really excited when Unite Community launched their very own Unite for Energy for All campaign, which has been signed off by the National Forum on Cost of Living. The Unite for Energy for All campaign is actually based on the demands of the Energy for All manifesto, with an added proviso calling for democratic public ownership of energy. I'd like to introduce Glenn Burrows.
Well, thanks. You've kind of said it all for me, but thanks, John. Yeah, Unite Community already mentioned, not the equivalent, a modern version of the National Unemployed Workers Movement, the need to keep organising and the need for unemployed people and disabled people to know about union organisation. What a pity the TUC didn't think of it first instead of one union, but that's another story. But I'm a member of the working group, which John has mentioned. That is the campaign working group on energy for all. So but I'll come to that in a minute, very briefly, of course. But I do want to mention my role as well in the Trades Union Council in Bridgewater, and also as chair of the NPC, because I think those two organisations, which haven't been mentioned yet, are absolutely vital to what we're talking about tonight. Trades Union Councils set up in the 19th century to bring together trades unions. And actually had quite a rough ride as well from the TUC again. In the process, were regarded as much too radical. And I hope we've now got over that. And I hope we now see that, trade unions do not exist in a bubble. That they have many faults, just as the environmental movement has many faults, Jamie. Some of the biggest punch-ups I've had over for instance, partnership, which Ian Allison mentioned, have been with union officials who fall into line very easily sometimes with that kind of approach from the manager. So, you know, many unions and still continue to sort of exist in a bit of a bubble. They've got a lot to deal with, I understand that, but trades councils exist to cross those boundaries, to bring trade unions together, and they also exist as a voice of the community. So what I'm saying is trades councils, 200 of them now operating in the UK, are absolutely essential to a campaign like this, to bring unions together and to bring the community as well. And of course, the National Pensioners Convention, you know, looking at most of you here, you know, you are the pensioners of the future, and the NPC exists to fight for conditions for pensioners. And we've seen already with a Labour government how attacking, first of all, pensioners, how necessary it is to be defending pensioners' rights. So our NPC region fully supports the Fuel Poverty Action campaign, and I think, you know, we see ourselves as a crucial part of anything we're talking about. Unity was never more crucial, and divide and rule was never more prevalent. We cannot sit on our arses and think that this new Labour government is going to operate in the way we want it to. I'm sorry. We need to unite, and we need to put the pressure on, not just on this issue, but on many other issues as well. So we really do have to think about how we can work together. Fuel poverty, of course, particularly affects old people. First shock to me when I retired was suddenly I got to heat my home myself. I didn't have a workplace, and if I wanted to boil a kettle, it was my own electricity I had to use. I'm not paying tribute to employers here, but that is why fuel poverty is so crucial for old people. You actually have to heat your home all the time in the winter. You don't cut it off and go to work. So there's some really important issues. But Unite for Energy for All, which was set up in November 2023, has so far been campaigning on energy costs and ending fuel poverty. So we've had 2 or 3 national days of action on that issue in Unite community as Unite for Energy for All. We've had loads of street stalls. Important again, trade unions need to get out on the streets, not just not saying this is much more important, but not just on picket lines, but to be out there in the community, to making people realise, where trade unions are and what they are. And Unite community does that. We have regular street stalls, not just on fuel poverty. We had a postcard campaign, and sent 10,000 postcards, signed postcards to Rishi Sunak on the issue of fuel poverty. So that was part of that action. So we're now moving into a new emphasis, and our new emphasis in the Unite for Energy for All campaign group is renationalisation of energy. We think that's absolutely the vital demand now we've got to be making, and also a worker-led movement away from fossil fuels, which has already been talked about. So those are our 2 aims for the campaign, and of course we want to be involved in this campaign absolutely fully. We are currently liaising with the energy unions within Unite, which is obviously important, and we all know the kind of problems that Ian referred to when you raise with nuclear power workers, as I have often done in the past, living near 3 nuclear power stations, none of them operating at the moment. But when you raise it with workers, they immediately rush to the defence of the employer and close down the debate. We've got to end that situation. We've got to be able to have that debate. And in Unite, in Unite community, we are trying to liaise with the energy sector workers within Unite. Absolutely vital that we do that. I mean, why the hell do they see employers as protecting their jobs? When it suits employers, they close down jobs anyway. So we've got to get the unions on the side of this move away from fossil fuels. We've got to get the unions involved in developing green energy and not seeing it as a threat to their jobs. And we see that's absolutely crucial. I will stop there because people are, I'm sure, getting tired. But just a couple of things. On the 1st of October, Unite for Energy for All has a national day of action. Again, street stalls, and these will be the 2 things we're highlighting, the things that I've mentioned: getting unions on side and renationalisation of the energy companies. And just to mention one other event, on the 24th of October in Bridgewater, Bridgewater Trades Council is organising, that's International Climate Action Day, and we're organising an event called, apologies to the Welsh person who spoke earlier, but the title of it is How Green is My Workplace? And we're doing that in a way so that we can involve local reps, environmental reps, or anyone who's had an interest in trying to make any kind of green changes. So that will be the main theme of that evening, but we'll also link it. Tariq Latif is coming to speak as well about the wider issues involved with climate change. So that's something from Bridgewater Trades Council. So I'll stop there, Stuart.
Okay,
Thank you.
brilliant. Thank you, Glenn. Now, our final speaker tonight going to be Jonathan Bean, the FPA Policy in Parliament spokesman. And that's because this evening he is attending a meeting with MPs at an event in Parliament. But he would like me to read this out. There has been progress on prepayment meters and standing charges, and now the real battle begins on reshaping the energy market to deliver affordable energy for all and bringing all homes up to standard. We are meeting MPs and ministers, and the next year will be critical to our success. As well as a climate crisis, we are in a fuel poverty crisis, and now 2 million low-income pensioners are at risk this winter because Rachel Reeves has taken away their heating lifeline, the winter fuel payment. The big issue is energy prices are still way too high, 65% higher than in 2020, and that's unaffordable for millions of us. So many people end up turning off their heating or going out a warm shower or hot food. Our energy pricing system needs to change. The high prices result from high profits and weak regulation. It's not just huge profits from oil and gas firms. Ofgem also gave energy retailers like British Gas and Scottish Power an extra 2 billion in profit last year. They got big bonuses whilst we were stuck in cold, damp homes. The whole system is rigged and we are being ripped off. We can produce clean energy for 6p a unit, but we get charged 24p. We already have times where excess energy means it's free, but those who really need this free energy don't get it, and we get charged £330 in standing charges before we even get any energy. That's why we urgently need a new energy pricing system, energy for all. This will ensure that everyone, pensioners and everyone else, has the essential energy they need to stay warm and safe and live a decent life. We can deliver this using our increasingly supply of cheap energy and by reducing the huge costs and profits that we make energy unaffordable currently. Support for energy for all continues to build. It's gone from huge public support with 660,000 signing a petition to building support from many organisations and MPs, including the government's Fuel Poverty Committee. The huge support is helping us get to the government to listen. There have been progress on prepayment meters and standing charges. Now the real battle begins on reshaping the energy market to deliver affordable energy for all and bringing all homes up to standard. We are meeting MPs and ministers, and next year will be critical to our success. This includes us helping shape the government's centrepiece initiative, Great British Energy, so it delivers for us, not international investors. And fighting for a huge investment in training for both renewable energy and retrofitting, so we have enough people with the right skills to deliver ambitious plans. And before we finish tonight, I would also just like to make a special mention to the Unite Climate Justice Caucus. We wouldn't be able to get this or Unite for Energy for All off the ground without them. Clara can't be here tonight, but she has asked me to mention to everyone that this Thursday, as well as the FBA meeting we have, the TUC, there is a TUC Climate Justice preview event, and the link will be in the chat there. Also, if you'd like to join Fuel Poverty Action, drop us a message. We do not charge membership fees. We just ask that people contribute whatever they can, and that's whether it's a donation or just a few hours of time. There's a link in the chat below. And finally, our next Workers for Energy for All meeting is going to be on Tuesday, the 24th of September, where, among other things, we'll be speaking to the Greener Jobs Alliance and also workshopping motions for conference season next year. So do check your inboxes for the invite. Thank you, everyone, for an amazing launch. I'm really happy to have you all here. And I think just before we go, it'd be great because there's so many of you on this call. We could go to gallery and just get if you're happy to turn your cameras on, just so we can get a shot of everyone's faces this evening.